Nora wanted to win the argument. She wanted the last word, and she didn't stop to measure what it might break. "You argue a lot to be a man. No wonder you're so tiny down there," she said. And the second those words left her mouth, the room changed shape. What followed wasn't a crash. It was a quiet that felt like a floor giving way. Nora and Ethan had been married for years. From the outside, they looked ordinary. Two people with commutes, dinners, dry cleaning tickets, and shared streaming passwords. Friends would have said they were fine. Neighbors would have waved and never guessed a thing. But there were small fractures behind closed doors. Tiny, repeated moments that clipped pieces off the trust without leaving a visible mark. Their marriage wasn't a disaster. It was just never easy. And the little cuts, accumulated sarcasm that wore joke masks, disagreements that got shelved instead of solved. Over time, the unsaid piled up until it felt like a heavy, invisible furniture they had to walk around. Warmth thinned, obligation thickened. Silence learned how to follow them from room to room like a shadow. Ethan always seemed like the steady one, the man who didn't rattle, who spoke like a verdict and moved like nothing touched him. Nora had never once thought of him as fragile, never imagined there was a soft place he protected, something old he kept folded out of sight. But there was. Ethan carried an insecurity from boyhood that he never named out loud. One he'd tried to starve of oxygen and never fully could. It wasn't a story he told, not even to Nora. In all their years together, she never realized how much it mattered. Until one night, one ordinary fight, one thoughtless sentence, she found the seam and ripped it without knowing. It had been one of those evenings that starts with a sigh and ends with a storm tension like static in the air, both of them tired, both of them sharp. The argument rose fast and useless, more about scoring than solving, more about being right than being okay. Nora wanted to win. She wanted the last word. She wanted him to feel how fed up she was. She didn't think. She launched. "You argue a lot to be a man. No wonder you're so tiny down there." The anger in the room didn't explode. It vanished. Ethan didn't shout back. He didn't return fire. He didn't even roll his eyes like he sometimes did when he'd had enough. He stopped, like a door slamming inside him. His face didn't contort. It froze. His jaw tightened. His hands curled a fraction at his sides, and for the first time in their marriage, Nora saw something that made her stomach go cold. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just exasperation. It was hurt so naked it felt indecent to look at. Betrayal knotted with humiliation. It was the look of someone whose private scar had just been traced in public. Without a word, Ethan turned and walked away. Nora stood there, waiting for the next beat, the slam of a door, the return volley. Anything that meant the fight was still a fight. It didn't come. The absence of sound was worse than any insult he could have thrown back. Fights usually have a script anger. Shouting, stomping off, a return, maybe a half apology, maybe a shoulder bump that means we're not okay, but we're still here. This time the script was blank. Ethan didn't come back to their room that night. Nora told herself he was cooling off, that he'd slide into bed after she fell asleep, that morning would soften the edges. When she reached for him at dawn, she found nothing but sheets. A new kind of fear crept in. Ethan had never slept elsewhere before. Even in their worst seasons, his back would face her back, but his body would still be there, a presence that said, not today, but also, still us. She checked the kitchen, checked the couch, checked the small places people go when they need to breathe. She found him in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed, unmoving, eyes on a place that didn't exist in the room. He wasn't packing. He wasn't pacing. He looked like a switch flipped in him and turned off the light. "Ethan," she said from the doorway. Silence. "Why are you sleeping in here?" He didn't answer. She tried again, asked if he was still angry, if he was coming back to bed, if they could talk. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. His quiet was louder than any slam of a door. Days stretched. Nothing changed. Nora told herself it would pass. These things settle. He'll exhale. He'll come back to the table. He didn't. He avoided her. If she entered a room, he left. If she spoke, he offered air. If she reached out, he recoiled like a hand from a stove. This wasn't sulking, and it wasn't fury. It was erasure. She tried to fix it like she always had with gestures. She cooked his favorites. Plates came back half-eaten or not at all. She tried light jokes. He didn't lift at the edges. She reached for his hand in passing. He stiffened like a line had been drawn. That's when a sharp truth opened in her. She had believed that arguing meant there was still something to fight for, that as long as they could get loud, they still cared. Silence was worse. Silence was a flat line. What Nora didn't understand yet was that her sentence had done more than bruise his ego. It had ripped an old wound that never fully knitted. Ethan had been self-conscious about his size since he was a teenager. It wasn't a joke he shared. It was a shadow he tried to walk ahead of. High school had been unkind in the way that spreads fast locker room whispers, a rumor that didn't have to be true to do damage. It reached the girl he liked. He still remembered the way she looked through him afterward, like he'd become unimportant in a single afternoon. He carried that forward. In his last serious relationship, he walked in on betrayal. When he asked why, she didn't lie or cry. She said, flat, "You can't satisfy me." Something collapsed in him that day, and he learned to build other parts, taller confidence, posture, achievement, hoping they'd cover the place that always felt small. Then he met Nora. With her, he didn't feel graded. He felt seen for parts he could control. He told himself she knew him beyond the body, beyond the rumor, beyond the single cruel sentence someone had once thrown at him, until the night she threw it. "You argue a lot to be a man. No wonder you're so tiny down there." The words were a door back to every hallway he'd tried to forget, laughter he pretended not to hear, that cold statement in an old apartment, the years spent pretending it didn't matter. And this time, it didn't come from a stranger. It came from the one person he thought would never put a knife in that place. For the first time in their marriage, he wasn't sure he could see her without seeing the words. A small, defensive thought he didn't want to own asked whether Nora was already getting what she wanted somewhere else, and the thought itself made him sick. Nora hit her limit one evening. She'd been waiting for normal to return and watched things slide further out instead. She walked toward the guest room, ready to apologize for the 1,000th time, braced to see him scrolling his phone like always. The room was empty. The shower ran. His phone lay on the bed, screen lit. She wasn't someone who checked phones. Even now she hesitated, then told herself she'd only glance to see if he'd booked a hotel. If there was a clue to the next thing she'd have to face. She didn't dig before she saw it. An email preview on the lock screen. Subject: regarding divorce proceedings. Her breath skipped. Divorce? No, this had to be a mistake, a misdirect, a spam trap. But beneath all the immediate arguments, a deeper part of her recognized what this was. He wasn't angry. He wasn't punishing her with quiet. He was preparing to leave. Panic rose fast. Her hands shook. She set the phone back like it might explode and stepped away as if distance could undo what she'd seen. When Ethan came out of the shower, she was waiting, heart loud, words thin. "Are you really thinking about divorcing me over one argument?" she asked. For the first time in weeks, he looked directly at her. There was no anger there, and no grief either. Just nothing. "You think this is just about that night," he said, calm in a way that told her the decision had already been measured. That was when Nora understood that her sentence was not the cause. It was the final proof. This was about years, the fights they shelved, the drift they chose not to name, the way they let distance become a third presence in the house. Her line had been the last straw, not the first. Nora apologized again and again, this time with more than words. She reshaped days around small acts of care. She left notes that weren't manipulations. She tried to have any conversation, even about weather, just to feel the thread again. Ethan answered in fragments. Nods, shrugs. I don't know. And the hollowness of it told her he did know. He just wasn't ready to hand her his answer. Nora used to think regret could be worked off like a stain, that enough effort could rewind a single moment and make it not have happened. This was a different kind of damage. Ethan had already stepped away. All she could do was watch the distance stretch and hope it wasn't a permanent measure. Then, one evening, she passed the guest room and stopped mid-stride. Ethan stood by the bed with a suitcase, clothes folded in a way that said, decision, not threat. You're leaving? She asked, voice a breath's width. He sighed. His shoulders rose and fell, like he was trying to move the weight without dropping it. He didn't look at her right away. He gripped the suitcase edge like a rail. Finally, he turned. I don't know if I can get past this, he said. It hit harder than a shout. She'd prepared for a fight and ran into a truth. Tears came without permission. Pride fell with them. I love you, she said, voice cracking. I'm messed up. I would take it back if I could, but I can't. Tell me what to do. Something changed on his face. Small, wary, real. You can't take it back, he said softly. And I can't unhear it. He paused. But maybe I don't want to walk away. Not yet. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise. It was a door that wasn't closed. Ethan didn't leave that night. The damage didn't leave either. The road ahead would be long if there was a road at all. And both of them understood that some wounds don't disappear because someone wants them to. Could their marriage survive what happened? That would be decided in the daily choices neither of them had been making for years. Truth instead of sarcasm. Repair instead of victory. Presence instead of performance. But for the first time in a long stretch, there was the smallest evidence of a we. What do you think? Can something like this be rebuilt? Or is some damage final? Let us know.